Ladies and gentlemen, presenting Calvin Johnson.
Stafford took a big firing to the outside.
And this guy just was go-go gadget arms, or jump through the roof to get it, or turn and twist his body. He caught everything. He looked amazing.
We're going to see clips of him running through individuals, catching the ball on the 8-yard line and dragging two guys.
For 9 seasons, the NFL had a problem it couldn't solve. A player so physically gifted, he was a living glitch in the system. A 6'5", 240-pound force of nature who could run faster and jump higher than everyone else on the field. They called him Megatron. But how did this quiet kid from Georgia become the most dominant offensive weapon in football? And why, at the absolute peak of his powers, did he choose to simply vanish from the game? Calvin Johnson's journey began in the outskirts of Atlanta, Georgia. From a young age, it was clear he was different. By the time he was in middle school, he was already 6 feet tall, possessing a frame that hinted at a once-in-a-lifetime talent. At Sandy Creek High School, he translated that potential into pure dominance, racking up nearly 1,500 receiving yards and 18 touchdowns. He was named the top player in Georgia, but his athletic genes weren't limited to the field. He was such a gifted baseball prospect that the Los Angeles Dodgers reportedly offered him a $1 million contract to give up football in high school. But his destiny was on the field. Despite his growing profile, Johnson stayed local, committing to Georgia Tech. Suiting up for the Yellow Jackets allowed him to play at the highest level while getting a top-tier education. And the college football world was put on immediate notice. In just his second game, at only 18 years old, he dominated Clemson by receiving for 127 yards and 3 touchdowns. Instantly, ACC defenses knew they had a new problem to deal with, but he was a problem that couldn't be solved. He was named ACC Rookie of the Year and then followed it up by being named First-Team All-ACC as a sophomore. And just when you thought he couldn't be more dominant, he was crowned king during his 2006 junior season. He put up over 1,200 yards and 15 touchdowns in a campaign so dominant, he was named the ACC Player of the Year and won the Biletnikoff Award, leaving no doubt he was the best receiver in the nation. He had shattered Georgia Tech's records and proven everything he needed to. He decided to forego his senior season and enter the NFL draft. The college football world knew he was a monster, but the 2007 NFL Combine is where the myth became a quantifiable fact. At 6'5", 239 pounds, Calvin Johnson stepped up to the line and ran the 40-yard dash in a blistering 4.35 seconds. It was a number that didn't make sense, a time that defied the laws of physics and left scouts and coaches speechless. They had just witnessed a living cheat code. And just like that, Calvin Johnson was drafted 2nd overall by the Detroit Lions, right after the Oakland Raiders selected quarterback Jamarcus Russell.
With the 2nd pick in the 2007 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions take wide receiver Calvin Johnson, Georgia Tech.
A move that would go down as one of the biggest busts in league history. For any other player, being drafted by the Lions was a career death sentence. For Calvin Johnson, it was the beginning of something legendary. During Johnson's rookie season, veteran Lions receiver Roy Williams, amazed by his sheer size and powerful hands, gave him the nickname that would become iconic. Comparing his physical presence to the towering leader of the Decepticons from the Transformers, he started calling him Megatron. The name was a perfect fit for a player who seemed more like a machine built in a factory than a man, and it stuck with him for the rest of his career. After a solid rookie season in 2007, the true challenge arrived in 2008. That year, the Detroit Lions made history for all the wrong reasons, going 0-16 and becoming the first team to ever lose 16 games in a season. But while the franchise was hitting rock bottom, Calvin Johnson was its only saving grace. In the middle of that historically bad season, he put up a monster stat line, over 1,300 receiving yards and an NFC-leading 12 touchdowns, all while catching passes from a rotating cast of 3 different quarterbacks. Yet somehow, he was still overlooked for the Pro Bowl. It was a perfect snapshot of his early career, a superstar putting up legendary numbers without any of the national recognition he deserved. But in 2009, that began to change.
With the 1st pick in the 2009 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Matthew Stafford, quarterback, Georgia.
Matthew Stafford.
For the first time, there was a glimmer of hope in Detroit, but the connection wasn't instant. Stafford battled injuries for his first 2 seasons, playing in just 13 games. Even while waiting for his franchise quarterback to get healthy, Calvin's dominance never wavered. In 2010, he still put up over 1,100 yards and 12 touchdowns, finally earning his first trip to the Pro Bowl. But 2011 was different. Stafford was finally healthy, and the league witnessed what happens when a top quarterback teams up with the NFL's cheat code. Megatron exploded, catching 2 touchdowns in each of the first 4 games as the Lions started the season 5-0. He ended that year on one of the most dominant stretches in NFL history, putting up over 200 receiving yards 3 times in a 4-week span, including a monster performance in his first ever playoff game. The connection was there, the Lions were a winning team, and Calvin Johnson was named a first-team All-Pro. He was no longer a secret, he was a marked man. And in 2012, every defense in the league built their game plan around stopping him. But it didn't matter. That season, he did something the NFL had never seen before. 8 straight games with over 100 receiving yards, a record that still stands today. What's even more insane is that the Lions lost 7 of those 8 games. Everyone in the stadium knew the ball was coming to him, and he was still unstoppable. But with team wins out of reach, he decided to chase history instead, setting his sights on a number that seemed untouchable: Jerry Rice's single-season receiving yards record. Entering Week 16, he needed 175 yards to break it. He went out and put up a monstrous 225-yard performance, shattering the record with a game to spare. He came incredibly close to the mythical 2,000-yard mark, finishing the year with an unbelievable 1,964 yards. After a season that shattered the NFL record books, the question for Calvin Johnson heading into 2013 was simple: what could he possibly do for an encore? While 2012 was the best statistical season of his career, his greatest single-game performance was yet to come. By this point, Megatron putting up well over 1,000 yards had become normalized, but what wasn't normal was totaling over 300 yards in a single game. In a Week 8, 31-30 barn-burner win over the Dallas Cowboys, Johnson put on an absolute masterclass. He caught a staggering 14 passes for 329 yards and a touchdown. The performance ranks as the 2nd most receiving yards in a single game in NFL history, just 7 yards shy of the all-time record. He was so unstoppable that Cowboys star receiver Dez Bryant was seen on the sideline screaming at his own coaches and quarterback in sheer frustration. But Megatron would not stop there. Despite playing in just 14 games that season due to injury, he still put up a ridiculous 1,492 receiving yards and 12 touchdowns. It was the 3rd consecutive year he averaged over 100 yards per game, and his 3rd straight season being named a first-team All-Pro, cementing one of the most dominant 3-year stretches the league has ever seen. The physical toll, however, was beginning to show. In 2014, Johnson was hampered by nagging ankle and knee injuries that limited him to just 13 games. For the first time in 4 years, he failed to lead the team in receiving. But a down year for Calvin Johnson was still a Pro Bowl caliber season for anyone else. He still broke the 1,000-yard mark, putting up 1,077 yards and 8 touchdowns while clearly playing at less than 100%. His toughness and presence helped lead the Lions to an 11-5 record and a return to the playoffs. In a controversial wildcard game against the Dallas Cowboys, Johnson had 5 catches for 85 yards, but the Lions would ultimately lose after a critical pass interference penalty against the Cowboys was mysteriously overturned. It was another frustrating early playoff exit. He had given his body to get the team to the postseason, only to have it end in heartbreak. It was a theme that was becoming all too familiar. Coming into the 2015 season, fans would have never expected that Johnson was approaching the end. He was not far removed from his record-breaking years, and he was still viewed as one of the very best. The season started as a disaster for the Lions, who lost 7 of their first 8 games. But as the team struggled, Calvin continued to play like the professional he was. He had a vintage Megatron performance on Thanksgiving Day, catching 3 touchdowns against the Philadelphia Eagles. He gutted out the season, finishing with over 1,200 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns, numbers that earned him his 6th and final trip to the Pro Bowl. From the outside, he was still an elite 1,000-yard receiver. He had missed only 8 games in his entire 9-year career, a testament to his incredible toughness. But behind the scenes, the constant grind of playing through pain on a team that couldn't win had reached its limit. He had given everything he had. He was an unsolvable problem on the field, But that level of dominance, especially on a team that was constantly struggling, came at a heavy price. For years, Calvin Johnson was the Detroit Lions' entire offense. He was the sole focus of every opponent, every week. That meant enduring a relentless physical assault. He was constantly double and triple teamed, taking huge hits on every play. He played through shredded ankles, broken fingers, and chronic pain that would have sidelined other players for months. His body was being ground into dust. But it wasn't just the physical toll. He gave everything to a franchise that could never quite build a winner around him. He made the playoffs only twice in 9 years and never won a single game. The physical pain was immense, but the mental exhaustion of carrying an entire team with no real hope of a championship was just as punishing. Something had to give. So in 2016, the unthinkable happened. At just 30 years old, Calvin Johnson retired. The NFL world was stunned. He was coming off a season with over 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns and had missed only 8 games in his entire career. From the outside, he still looked unstoppable. But for Megatron, the decision was simple. The physical toll the game had taken on his body had become too much. He had nothing left to prove on a team going nowhere. A team that he later stated had refused to trade him. And just like that, the most dominant weapon in football vanished on his own terms. In the end, the mystery of Calvin Johnson is solved. He became unstoppable because he was a physical specimen the league had never seen before. And he walked away because the cost of that dominance became too high a price to pay. His career may not have the Super Bowl rings of other legends, but his legacy isn't measured in championships. It's measured in a peak of individual dominance so high it may never be seen again. In 2021, he was rightfully inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame on his very first ballot, a final, undeniable statement. He was the most dominant NFL player ever. If you want more of the greatest NFL stories, click this video right here and subscribe to PigSkin so you never miss a video again.